then that gives the log operators the ability to make that policy decision. But in the absence of that, that would be the only blocker for the BIS document. And I think Peter has some stuff to say.
Okay, let me try and hit the new button. So Peter, you can now speak, I think.
Yes, can you hear me?
We do.
Yep.
So I think there's the how do we technically do this, and I think the other half is understand, should we do this? I mean, I know there's been a lot of question about what parts should be redacted, and because this is also the previous slide suggested this is just looking at subject alternative names and DNS names, but it's also been brought up, that subject names frequently end up with personal information in them. And I think that that's something that needs direct addressing on this because, yes, logs might now be able to reject certs, moving to should, but it's not clear that they should reject every cert just because it has what appears to be a personal name in the cert. Because that doesn't actually solve the kind of core problem of how do we get to a, world of CT everywhere.
So Peter, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the policy change from a must to a should by itself will not be enough to address the issue of personal certificates?
Well, I'm saying it half addresses it because it allows the log to reject the request to log a personal cert, but it doesn't. I mean, if the objective is to log all certs that are reasonably usable on websites, I mean, what do we do when there is a website that has, say, a first name and last name in a certificate?
Peter, would it be fair to say that you believe that the must to should change is the right change to be made for the BIS document, and that the scenarios relative to personal certs and redaction are something that should be covered in the redaction specification independently?
Yes, I think that the must to should allows 6962 BIS to give the opportunity out, and then we still, I think, as a working group, still have to address the other half of the problem.
Do you have other scenarios that you can think of as examples that you think should be covered in that BIS document that we should consider as scenarios?
Well, I think the other one that has, there's been suggestions, I believe, of changing the BIS document to remove the technically constrained option from, I believe it's section 4. And I think the concern there is also, even at the base domain, the question is, do we handle, the binding of just knowing who the issuer of a cert is to a given domain can be problematic, especially in the kind of enterprise CA scenario, or however you want to put it, because simply knowing that, example corpse CA has issued for newthing.com can actually, be a privacy issue, or I shouldn't say a privacy issue, a corporate secrecy issue, as our well-known chairs put it.
Thank you. That's a great example of a scenario that really should be considered in the redaction work.
Okay, so then I think the last issue we have in relation to the BIS document and pushing it into IETF last call would be the historic fetching of SDHs. And so is there anyone who thinks that the addition of this API would be a problem? And is there anyone who really wants it?
So as I mentioned, I think it would be like a nice optional API, but it would be okay. But if there was like a monitoring API document, then it would have that document would have been a much better place for this API.
So you don't think it needs a change in the BIS document?
That's correct.
It looks like Rob Stradling isn't in the meeting here, but I've spoken with him, and I know that he, for CRTSH, would like to see a REST API that would be standardized for services like that. And my personal opinion, again, this is Ryan Hurst, is that this particular API is an example of something that belongs inside of a broader query API instead of just a bolt-on to the log infrastructure.
Okay. So it seems most people want this not to be in the BIS document itself and in the new log monitoring API.
That would be my opinion.
I see lots of nodding and nobody rushing to the mic. Okay. Okay. So that would mean, I think that once you update the section 5.1, we can put the document into IETF last call.
Okay.
And in the meantime, if somebody wants to draft up a draft to the API.
Okay. So then we get to do the two new items of new work that were on the agenda. One is the log monitoring API. I'm not sure if there's anyone here that wants to talk about that, but otherwise we can just keep that discussion on the list for now, because there definitely seems to be an interest. And the other item is the expect CT TLS header, which will be discussed later in the HTTP BIS working group on Thursday. So that's not something we need to discuss here, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, around necessary. So just one more thing for BIS. I've started the reference implementation, which is currently at my personal GitHub repo, and there is a link, I think, in slide 11 of the presentation. It only does two things right now, which is adding a chain and then providing an STH, but it all does it all obviously with 696 to BIS data structures. So I would appreciate if people had a look. I'm particularly looking for Python reviewers for the code, so I can merge it upstream back to the main open source CT repo.
Oh, right. Okay, so jumping back to the other document we still have open, there's the threat analysis document, which we have two people that are sort of conflicting their opinions, and the document has been stuck for, I don't know, half a year now. So what we're really looking at is maybe someone who's willing to become an editor on the document so that we can just fix the last issues about the dual CA attack and move this document into working group last call. So is there anyone who would like to volunteer to do that task? That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty straightforward. It's just basically one paragraph. It should be pretty quick. We will clear the way for you in terms of, process and dealing with people and so on. We just need somebody to bang this out.
Run again. So yes, I'll be happy to take on the changes necessary, and while I'm doing that, I'll make sure that it reflects what BIS currently has. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That it would be really good to get this document out because it's basically almost ready.
Right. I mean, one of the problems we've been having is that we've been getting absolutely no feedback from the mailing list when we raise this question, and it's made it impossible to move on. So if anybody does have any opinions, that'd be a good, time to raise them here if you'd like. And if not, we'll just, appreciate Aaron having volunteered to bang this out. And I'm the shepherd for that one. So as soon as it's done, I'll get a write-up done and we'll get through the process.
Hi, this is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. So I feel a little bit responsible for this impasse, having raised the dual CA attack. I tried to do a review of the discussion and the back and forth, and there's just a ton of text.
Yes.
And there's walls of text in multiple different directions, and there's complaints in different directions. And I found myself stymied by, it wasn't even like everyone was agreeing on what they were trying to do in the discussion. So I kind of threw up my hands and I was like, I don't know how to unpick all of that. In terms of specifically describing the dual CA attack, I felt like the text that was there that was describing the attack was correct.
So
No.
you mean the text from David that isn't in the document, or?
No, the text that is in the document?
I believe that the text that's in the latest version of the document,
Okay.
so this is what I mean. The discussion around that text was like, well, there's this other text that's related to the dual CA attack that isn't the fault of CT, that shouldn't be present there, and
Right.
this is my memory of it. I haven't looked at it recently because I don't want to re-traumatize myself, but when I believe it's the most recent version, I believe that the text that's in there does actually describe the dual CA attack, at least the stuff that is talking about the dual CA attack. Now, whether that's the fault of CT or not, or whether that's something CT can fix or not, I don't know. I don't believe that CT actually resolves that issue. Arguably it's an issue with our inability to effectively revoke. But there's just like so many different moving parts that it makes it very difficult to come in and say, yes, this is good, because the arguments are like, well, there's other pieces that are associated with it that aren't actually maybe necessarily appropriate. And I didn't know how to resolve any of that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the right way to break this down is to delete all previous state completely. Take a look at the current document, take a look at David's response to the current document, and don't look at anything prior to that. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense, although there may be multiple replies. I think there's a back and forth set of replies.
I think David's posts tend to be pretty self-contained.
Yeah. You can only read David's latest reply and the draft text. Those two bits of text should be the only thing you need.
Okay, but there's still in David's reply, I believe there is also still a set of questions that aren't about whether the dual CA attack is sufficiently described. It's also about whether there's additional text that isn't about. Anyway.
So feel free to ignore that part for your review of the text of the dual
Okay.
CA attack.
Rich Salzakamai. If you look at recent Chromium and Mozilla security mailing lists, what is two different CAs is pretty much like what's an NP hard kind of problem to solve these days. So I think describing the attack, we can't do it, if only because we can't determine if this CA is actually different under different administrative control than the other CA, and then move to last call.
This is DKG. I'm not actually sure that administrative control is relevant to the dual CA attack. Right? I mean, the dual CA attack is that there's two different particular public keys that are associated with two different CAs. Whether they're administratively different or not is irrelevant to the particular attack.
But it's an example of how intractable the problem is, because if I have two different CAs keys and I can't tell if it's start combo one from
Right. But so you're saying that the attack is actually much more relevant today simply because there are multiple things that are under control of one party. Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody have any other business?
Okay, if you haven't signed the blue sheets, you have them up front.
And I guess enjoy your lunch.
Yeah.
Thanks, and sorry for all the technical problems.
Yeah, thank you so much, and especially thank you for volunteering for this kind of therapist thing. But it should be straightforward. Yeah. What's going to happen is calls the shepherd's line. He writes it, he does the shepherd's line up, he sends it to the IETF to review. They review it, and flag any issues, and then once they're happy to send it to the IETF for
That's right. Well, yeah. Then you'll get emails that tell you if you want to get into the article, if you want to get to Alt 48, where you have to make your last statement if you're on the IPR or whatever, and then it just moves on. It's just, and just a technical process that's triggered by email.
Is there anything that
You already did because you already did a write-up between the differences between 662 and this, and so I will fold that in plus the latest changes that we agreed on, and then the write-up is basically done. So thank you for doing my job.
I don't know if it's
Seen you as the speaker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, so we were dealing about protocol because there may have a relationship to other uses, not particularly this one, for the law.